My name is Abigail, and at 28, I never expected to find out I was financing my entire family's lifestyle. I was the youngest, but I was also the one who was always responsible. The one who achieved things, the one who provided for them. My mother raised me to believe that family comes first, and that I owed them everything. When I finally confronted her about secretly paying for $9,300 in monthly family expenses, her response was more cutting than any knife could ever be. If you don't like living with family, you can leave. Where are you watching from today? Have you ever discovered that a loved one was taking advantage of your generosity? If so, hit like and subscribe and let me know in the comments if you think blood is really thicker than water. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Springfield, Massachusetts, my family looked completely normal from the outside. Our modest two-story colonial home with its small but well-kept yard was a symbol of the American dream my parents had worked so hard to build after immigrating from Ireland as young adults. My mother, Diana, my father, Patrick, my older brother, Ryan, who is 32 now, and my sister, Megan, who is 30, made up our family. As the youngest by 2 years, I often found myself trying to get my siblings' and parents' approval. My childhood memories are filled with warm family get-togethers, weekend barbecues, and holiday parties. My father worked as an engineer at a local manufacturing plant, and my mother ran a small boutique downtown. They both stressed the importance of education, hard work, and loyalty to the family above all else. Everything changed when I turned 12. My father had a sudden heart attack at work and died within a few hours. The shock ripped through our family like an earthquake, leaving nothing but devastation in its wake. Not only did we lose the emotional foundation of our family, but we also lost our main financial support. My father's life insurance policy wasn't big enough to keep up our lifestyle for long. In the months that followed his death, I watched my mother change. The warm, laughing woman who used to bake cookies and read bedtime stories became more and more worried, angry, and controlling, especially about money. Every purchase had to be justified, and every bill was a clear source of stress. She would stay up late at the kitchen table with a calculator and stacks of papers, her shoulders hunched over. Family has to stick together now became her motto. We only have each other. I dealt with the family crisis the only way my 12-year-old self knew how, by trying to be perfect. While my siblings reacted to our father's death by rebelling and withdrawing, I threw myself into school with a new sense of purpose. I stayed up late studying, joined academic clubs, and began to show a natural talent for math and finance that my teachers quickly noticed. Your daughter has a gift with numbers, my 8th grade math teacher told my mother during a parent-teacher conference. She should think about a career in finance. That casual comment planted a seed that would grow to shape my future. By the time I was 16, I had already planned out my academic path, get high grades in high school, a scholarship to a prestigious university, and a career in financial management. In my spare time, I studied finance textbooks, fascinated by the logic and strategy behind money management. During my junior year of high school, I applied for every scholarship I could find, writing countless essays and collecting recommendation letters. All that work paid off when I was given a large merit scholarship to Bentley University, which is known for its excellent business programs. My mother's reaction wasn't what I had hoped for. That's so far away, she said, frowning at the acceptance letter. And scholarships never cover everything. We can't afford all those hidden costs. But she couldn't argue with the financial logic, and I started at Bentley with a mix of excitement and guilt. The guilt only got worse when I called home during my first year and often heard about financial problems. My brother, without telling me, had dropped out of community college and was working odd jobs in retail. My sister had enrolled in expensive private university but was changing majors every semester, which meant she would have to stay in school for longer. I worked multiple jobs while in college, tutoring other students in finance and accounting, working in the campus library, and even preparing taxes during tax season. Every extra dollar I made went back home to help out, as my mother put it. I would send money to her account without ever asking for details about where it was going. trusting that it was necessary for our family's stability. Despite working 20 to 30 hours a week, I kept a 4.0 GPA and graduated summa cum laude. Campus recruiters noticed, and I got several job offers before I even graduated. I took a job at a well-known financial firm in Boston with a starting salary that made my eyes widen. For the first time since my father died, I felt like I could breathe financially. The next logical step would have been to find an apartment in Boston close to my new office. A few of my classmates were looking for roommates, and the thought of starting over in the city made me happy. But when I called my mother with the good news about my job, she immediately said, "So you'll be moving back home, right? The commute to Boston isn't that bad, and think of all the money you'll save on rent." I hesitated. "I was thinking of getting a place in the city," I said. "Abigail," my mother sighed, her voice taking on the tone that always made me feel selfish. "Your brother just lost his job again, and Megan's tuition just went up. I don't know how we're going to get through this month, but do what you want, of course." Just like that, my plans changed. I told myself it would only be for a short time, just until I had enough saved for a good emergency fund and help my family get back on their feet. I told myself that a 90-minute commute each way was a small price to pay for the people who had raised me. I told myself that family always comes first. The weekend after graduation, I moved back into my childhood bedroom, arranging my professional wardrobe and college textbooks in the same space that still held my high school trophies and childhood stuffed animals. It felt like I was taking a step backward, but I convinced myself it was a smart financial move. "You're so good with money, Abby," my mother said as she helped me unpack. "This family would be lost without you." I didn't know how true those words would turn out to be. My first day at Lambert Financial Advisors in downtown Boston was a mix of excitement and exhaustion. After waking up at 5:30 a.m. to make the long commute, I got to the shiny office building feeling like a fake in my new business clothes. But by the end of that first day, my boss had already complimented my analysis of a client's portfolio. And I felt a burst of confidence that maybe, just maybe, I really did belong in this world. That evening, as I sat with my mother at our kitchen table, she brought up the topic I had been expecting. "Now that you're making a real salary," she said, sliding a handwritten list across the table, "we should talk about your contribution to the household." The list gave a detailed breakdown of monthly costs, including the mortgage, utilities, groceries, car insurance, and many other things. The total at the bottom was divided by 4. "This will be your fair share," my mother explained, "since there are 4 of us living in the house." The amount seemed fair, even generous, given the location and size of our house compared to Boston apartment prices. I agreed without a second thought, actually feeling thankful that I could help ease my mother's financial stress after all she had done for us. "I can send the money to your account every month," I said. "Would the first of the month be okay?" My mother looked relieved and nodded. "That would be perfect. And maybe we could round it up a bit, just to cover unexpected costs. You know how things always come up." Again, I agreed. "And it would be easier if I just kept handling all the bills," she added. "No need to make things more complicated by splitting them up. I already have all the accounts set up." That choice, allowing my mother to handle all household expenses while I simply transferred money to her, would turn out to be my first big mistake. But at 22, excited about my first professional job and eager to show that I was an adult and responsible, I didn't question the plan. Within 2 months, I had settled into a routine. Weekdays meant early mornings, long commutes, long work hours, and late returns home. Weekends were for relaxing, helping around the house, and sometimes meeting up with the few high school friends who were still in the area. Most of my college friends had moved away for jobs or graduate school, and we only talked sometimes through text messages and social media likes. 3 months into this arrangement, my mother came to me with a worried look on her face. "The property taxes went up," she explained, "and the water heater needed to be fixed. Would you mind raising your contribution a little this month?" Of course, I didn't mind. And I didn't mind the next month when the car insurance went up, or the month after that when Ryan needed emergency dental work. The increases were always presented as temporary, special circumstances, but they never seemed to go down again. By the time I was 6 months into my job, I had my first performance review and got a small raise. That same evening, my mother mentioned that Megan had maxed out her credit card buying textbooks and needed help with the payments. Just until she finishes school, my mother promised me. You know how important education is. A pattern was starting to form, but it was so subtle that I barely noticed. My financial responsibilities at home grew at the same time as every raise I got. When I was promoted to junior analyst at the 9-month mark, with another pay raise, my monthly family contribution somehow grew to include my brother's car payment. He needs reliable transportation to job interviews, my mother explained when I questioned this expense. You want him to be able to take care of himself eventually, don't you? The way she framed these requests always made refusing seem selfish or short-sighted. How could I say no to helping my brother find a job? How could I put my own comfort ahead of my sister's education? What kind of daughter would refuse to help her widowed mother keep the family home? In the meantime, my career continued to grow. My natural talent for financial analysis, along with my willingness to work long hours and take on more projects, made me a rising star at Lambert Financial. By the end of my first year, I had been given several high-value clients who had specifically asked for me to manage their portfolios. My success at work became a strange source of stress at home. Every time I got a promotion or a bonus, I would get congratulations, which were quickly followed by new financial needs from my family. Ryan's car broke down and needed to be replaced. Megan decided to get a master's degree. The house needed a new roof. I started taking on more clients to earn more commissions, working evenings and weekends to meet the growing financial demands. The irony was not lost on me. As a financial advisor helping wealthy clients make their investments as good as possible and cut down on unnecessary spending, I had no idea where my own money was going besides the constantly growing amount I sent to my mother's account every month. 2 years into this arrangement, exhaustion had become my constant companion. Dark circles had become a permanent part of my face. My once active social life had shrunk to occasional drinks with coworkers, and even those nights out were often cut short because I needed to catch the last commuter train home. You should take better care of yourself, my friend Taylor said during a rare lunch date. You look tired, Abby. Just busy with work, I said without thinking. Still living at home? She asked, stirring her coffee. I nodded. It makes financial sense. Taylor looked at me with doubt, but didn't say anything else. The truth was, I wasn't sure it made financial sense anymore. The amount I now sent to my mother every month could have paid for a luxurious apartment in downtown Boston, which would have gotten rid of my exhausting commute and given me back valuable hours every day. But every time I thought about moving out, guilt stopped me cold. My family needed me. My mother reminded me of this often. By my 3rd year at Lambert Financial, I had been promoted to senior analyst with a big raise. I now managed a portfolio of wealthy clients and had a reputation for being a conservative but consistently successful investor. My professional life was everything I had dreamed of during those late nights of studying in college. My personal life, however, was basically non-existent. Dating seemed impossible with my schedule and living situation. Friends had stopped inviting me to events because they knew I would probably cancel at the last minute because of work or family obligations. My health was suffering from stress and a lack of sleep, and I had started having panic attacks that left me gasping for air in bathroom stalls at work. Still, I told myself this was only for a short time, just until Ryan found a steady job, just until Megan finished her master's program, just until things calmed down, just until. I didn't realize I had become a prisoner of those 2 words until the day everything changed. The discovery that would eventually change my life started with a simple talk in the break room at work. I was warming up my lunch in the microwave when Jordan, a coworker from the tax department, mentioned that he had recently moved into a new apartment. The rent is killing me, he groaned, stirring his coffee. $2,000 a month for a 1-bedroom in Cambridge. That sounds about right for the area, I said, thinking of the clients whose financial profiles I handled. Yeah, but with utilities and parking, I'm looking at almost $3,000 total. How much are you paying in Boston? Oh, I still live at home, I said, feeling that familiar blush of shame. At 28, most of my peers had their own places. I help with expenses there. Jordan nodded. Smart move. You're probably saving a fortune. I don't know about that, I said with a laugh that even to my own ears sounded hollow. Family comes with its own costs. How much do you contribute, if you don't mind me asking? Jordan quickly added, I'm just trying to figure out if my landlord is ripping me off. I paused, then gave him the rounded number I sent to my mother every month. Jordan's coffee mug stopped halfway to his lips. $9,000 a month? His voice rose in disbelief. For a family home in Springfield. Are you paying for a mansion? His reaction shocked me. No, it's just a normal house, but there are other expenses. My siblings. Abby, Jordan cut me off, his face serious. I do tax planning for a living. Unless your family home is a 30-room mansion with staff, something doesn't add up. He probably meant well, but his words stuck in my mind like splinters. That night on the train ride home, I found myself doing some math. How much was our mortgage? Really? What were the normal utility costs for a house our size? How much could my siblings possibly need for their expenses? For the first time in years, I allowed myself to really question the financial arrangement that had become my normal. The more I thought about it, the more Jordan's shocked reaction seemed right. I was sending my mother the same amount as a luxury car payment every month, with only the vaguest idea of where the money was going. 2 days later, I got a chance. My mother said she would be visiting my aunt in New Hampshire for the weekend. My siblings also had plans. Ryan with his new girlfriend and Megan at a conference for her master's program. I would have the house to myself, which was a rare thing. As soon as they had all left on Friday night, I went to my mother's home office. The small room next to her bedroom had always been off limits. Her private space for handling adult matters, as she had said. When we were kids, the rule had stayed with us into adulthood through an unsaid agreement. I felt like I was breaking in as I opened the door, half expecting alarms to go off. Instead, I found a very neat room with a desk, filing cabinets, and bookshelves. Everything was labeled and in its proper place. My mother's personality was perfectly reflected in this organized space. The filing cabinet was easy to open. My mother had always been careful about keeping records, a trait I had inherited. Folders were labeled by year and category: mortgage, utilities, insurance, medical, education, automotive, and more. I pulled out the folders for the current year and started looking through the contents at the desk. What I found over the next few hours made me feel sick. The mortgage payment on our house was $2,400 a month, a lot of money, but nowhere near what I had thought based on my contributions. Utilities were about $500 a month on average. These basic household costs added up to about $3,000 or $750 per person if split evenly among 4 residents. But that wasn't all. I found statements for 3 credit cards in my mother's name with balances close to their limits. The purchases were for clothes, jewelry, spa treatments, and expensive restaurants, places I knew my mother went to but had assumed she could afford on her boutique manager's salary. In the automotive folder, I found loan documents not just for Ryan's car but for a new luxury sedan my mother had bought 6 months earlier, a car she had told me was a special lease through the boutique. Both car payments were over $1,500 a month. The education folder showed that Megan's tuition was indeed expensive, but she had gotten large grants that covered almost 70% of the cost. The rest of the bill was much less than my mother had said when she asked for my help. The most shocking thing was a folder labeled savings that had statements for an account I had never known about. My mother had been putting money into this account for years, in large amounts that could only have come from my contributions. The current balance was over $100,000. My hands shook as I carefully put everything back in its place. My mind tried to make sense of what I had found. For 3 years, I had been paying for not just reasonable family expenses, But also my mother's luxury purchases, my brother's lack of responsibility, my sister's exaggerated needs, and a secret savings account. That could have paid for my own down payment on a house many times over. The betrayal was deep on many levels, not just the financial exploitation but the clever lies behind it. It hit me that my family, the people I had given up everything for, had been purposefully and methodically taking advantage of me. I went back to my bedroom and carefully figured out exactly how much I had been contributing to the household over the past 3 years, comparing it to the actual expenses I had just found. The difference was huge. Of the approximately $9,300 I sent every month, less than a third went to real shared expenses. The rest had been paying for my family's lifestyle upgrades, debt, and my mother's secret nest egg. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by my window, looking out at the neighborhood where I had grown up, a place that now felt strange and hostile. The family photos on my dresser seemed to mock me now, with their smiling faces hiding planning and lies. By morning, one thing was clear. I could no longer live in ignorance. I had to confront my family with what I knew, no matter what happened. I spent Saturday getting ready for the confrontation, putting together my evidence and strengthening my resolve. Sunday, when everyone came home, would be the day of reckoning. Sunday evening came with the familiar sounds of my family getting home, car doors slamming, footsteps on the porch, keys rattling in the lock. I had spent the day in a state of nervous anticipation, going over what I would say and how I would stay calm and factual despite the emotional turmoil inside me. I had made a simple dinner, just pasta and salad, and set the dining room table. Something we rarely did anymore since everyone usually ate at different times because of their schedules. When my mother came into the kitchen and saw the table set, her eyebrows went up in surprise. "What's the occasion?" she asked, putting down her overnight bag. "I thought it would be nice for all of us to eat together," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Could you tell Ryan and Megan that dinner is ready when they get in?" My mother looked at me curiously but nodded. Within 20 minutes, the 4 of us were sitting around the table that had been the center of family meals throughout my childhood. The normalcy of the scene felt unreal given what I knew and what I was about to do. We made small talk through the first part of the meal. My mother talked about her visit with my aunt. Ryan mentioned a good job lead. Megan talked about her conference. I nodded and asked the right questions, waiting for the right time. It came when my mother mentioned an upcoming family vacation she was planning to Florida. "It will be good for all of us to get away together," she said. "I've already put down deposits on a beachfront condo." "That sounds expensive," I said casually. "How are we paying for that?" A brief silence fell over the table. My mother looked at my siblings before answering. "We've been saving up," she said vaguely. "Family vacations are important." "When you say we've been saving, what exactly do you mean?" I asked, putting down my fork. My mother's face got a little harder. "Abigail, if you're worried about money, you don't have to come, although I would think that with your salary, a family vacation wouldn't be such a stretch." "My salary," I repeated. "Let's talk about my salary, Mom." Ryan and Megan looked at each other. My mother's body got stiff. "I'm not sure what there is to talk about," she said. "How about we talk about where my money has been going for the past 3 years?" I said, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "How about we talk about the fact that I've been paying $9,300 a month to this household?" My mother's face didn't show anything, but a slight flush crept up her neck. "You've been contributing your fair share to family expenses, yes." "My fair share," I repeated. "Would you like to know what I found that my fair share has actually been paying for?" I reached beside my chair and pulled up a folder I had made with copies of the documents I had found. I put it on the table and opened it. "Our mortgage is $2,400 a month," I started, laying out the statement. "Utilities are about $500 a month on average. That's a total of $2,900 for basic household expenses. If you divide that by 4 people, that's $725 per person." My siblings looked more and more uncomfortable. My mother's lips had formed a thin line. "Then there are the 2 car payments," I went on, putting those statements on the table. "Ryan's Pickup truck at $650 a month. And your new Audi, Mom, at $895. I don't drive or get any benefit from either of them. Abby, Ryan started, but I held up my hand. I'm not done. There are also the 3 credit cards with a total monthly payment of over $2,000 for clothes, restaurants, and spa treatments. I put those statements down. And Megan's tuition, which, after grants, comes to about $1,500 a month, not the $3,000 I was told. My sister's eyes widened. Mom told me you wanted to help with the full amount, she said quietly, that you insisted. And then there's this, I said, putting the savings account statement on top of the pile. $106,000 in a savings account. I knew nothing about, built with my money. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother stared at the documents, her face unreadable. Ryan looked at his plate. Tears were welling up in Megan's eyes. You went through my private papers, my mother finally said, her voice cold. Yes, I said without an apology. After 3 years of being lied to, I needed the truth. Where? Family, my mother said, as if that explained everything. Family takes care of each other. Is that what this is? I gestured to the papers. Taking care, or is it taking advantage? You make more than the rest of us combined, Ryan interjected. Defensively. Mom said you were happy to help out. Help out, yes. Pay for your new truck while you work part-time? Pay for Mom's luxury car and shopping sprees? Pay for a secret savings account? That's not helping out. That's being taken advantage of. You've always been so dramatic, Abigail, my mother sighed, shaking her head. This is what families do. They share resources. Share? I felt my carefully controlled calm slipping. When have any of you shared with me? When have you contributed? Anything close to what I have? When have you even been honest about where my money was going? You never asked, my mother said coldly. Because I trusted you. The words came out louder than I had meant. I trusted all of you. Lower your voice, my mother ordered, in the same tone she had used when I was a child. This behavior is not appropriate. Inappropriate. I almost laughed. What's inappropriate is stealing from your own daughter. What's inappropriate is lying to my face for years while draining my bank account. No one stole from you, my mother insisted. You agreed to contribute to this household. Under false pretenses. You told me it was for necessary expenses. Not luxury cars and secret savings accounts. Ryan stood up all of a sudden. I need to go, he mumbled, clearly not wanting to be a part of the confrontation. Sit down, I said firmly. We're all going to have this conversation. To my surprise, he sat down. Maybe he saw something in my expression that told him I wouldn't back down this time. What do you want, Abigail? My mother asked, her voice tired, now an apology. Fine, I'm sorry we didn't give you a detailed receipt for every expense. I want accountability, I said. I want to know why my own family would do this to me. I want my money back, and I want this arrangement to change. Completely going forward. Your money back? My mother actually laughed. After everything I've done for you, after raising you, feeding you, clothing you, and supporting your education, you think you don't owe anything for that? I paid for my own education with scholarships and jobs, I reminded her. And children don't owe their parents for raising them. That was your choice and your responsibility. My mother's face became hard, with an expression I rarely saw, pure, cold anger. Well, it's clear you've made up your mind about your family, she said. So what happens now? Are you going to punish us all because you suddenly decided you're being treated unfairly? I'm going to stop the financial exploitation, I said simply, starting right away. And how do you plan for us to pay the mortgage, the utilities, your brothers and sisters' needs? The same way other adults do, I said. With jobs and budgets and reasonable expectations. My mother stood up suddenly, pushing her chair back, with a scrape that made me flinch. If you don't like living with family, Abigail, you can leave, she said, her voice like ice. We managed before you and your money and we'll manage after. The words hit me like a physical blow. After years of giving up, after giving almost 70% of my income to support them, this was their reaction. Not regret, not understanding, but a cold dismissal. Tears filled my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Is that really how you all feel? I asked, looking at my siblings. Megan looked torn but stayed quiet. Ryan shrugged uncomfortably. Mom handles the money, he muttered. I just assumed you knew what was happening. Well, I said, standing up myself. Now I do know, and things are going to change. I picked up the documents with shaking hands and walked out of the dining room. Behind me, I heard my mother say something to my siblings in a low voice, but I didn't turn around. I grabbed my purse and car keys and left the house without another word. I drove around aimlessly for almost an hour, my vision blurred by tears. Eventually, I found myself outside Taylor's apartment building. I hadn't called or texted her, but I knew she was the only real friend I had left in the area. When she opened her door and saw my tear-stained face, she immediately pulled me into a hug. What happened? She asked, leading me to her couch. Through sobs and stops, I told her everything, the years of financial drain, the discovery of where my money had really been going, the confrontation, and my mother's cold ultimatum. Taylor listened without saying a word, her face looking more and more angry. When I was done, she took my hands in hers. Abby, she said gently but firmly, what they've been doing to you is financial abuse. It's not normal. And it's not okay. But they're my family, I whispered. Family doesn't treat each other this way, she insisted. Real family supports each other. They don't drain each other dry. As Taylor made up her guest room for me to stay the night, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. The family I had given up everything for had shown their true colors. The pain was immense, but there was also a hint of something else, the chance for freedom. I went home the next morning to get some clothes for work, half expecting the locks to be changed. Instead, I found the house quiet and empty. Everyone had already left for the day. A note on the kitchen counter in my mother's neat handwriting simply said, "We should talk when everyone calms down." The familiar handwriting, the reasonable tone, the idea that I was the one who needed to calm down, it was also typical of how conflicts had been handled in our family. Problems weren't fixed. They were smoothed over, buried, and forgotten until the next time they came up. Not this time. I went to work with an overnight bag and did my job mechanically, my mind somewhere else. During my lunch break, I called a real estate agent one of my clients had recommended and set up a time to see apartments in Boston that evening after work. I toured 3 places within walking distance of my office, eventually putting down a deposit on a 1-bedroom apartment in a safe building with a gym and a rooftop terrace. The rent was less than a third of what I had been paying my family. The apartment wouldn't be ready for 2 weeks, which meant I needed a temporary place to stay. Taylor offered her guest room for as long as I needed it, an act of friendship that made me cry again. When I went home that night to pack more of my things, my whole family was waiting in the living room. The scene reminded me of interventions from TV shows, the worried faces, the careful way they were sitting, the tension in the air. "We need to talk," my mother began, her voice trying to sound nice. "Yes, we do," I said, staying standing while they all sat down. "I've put a deposit on an apartment in Boston. I'll be moving out as soon as it's ready. In the meantime, I'll be staying with a friend." My announcement was clearly not what they had expected. My mother's face showed both surprise and a little bit of calculation. "Abigail, I think you're overreacting," she said. "Families have disagreements. That doesn't mean you run away." "I'm not running away," I corrected her. "I'm making a healthy choice for myself. I will no longer be helping with household expenses beyond my equal share for the time I'm still here. That comes to $725, which I will pay directly to the mortgage."
Company. Ryan leaned forward, his face worried.
"But what about my truck payment? It's due next week." "That's your responsibility," I said simply. "You're 32 years old, Ryan. It's time you paid for your own vehicle." "But I can't afford it on what I make," he said. "Then you should have bought a less expensive car," I said without emotion. "Or found a better paying job before taking on that debt." "This is exactly the kind of selfish attitude I was talking about," my mother said. "Family helps family through tough times. 3 years is not a tough time, I pointed out. It's a lifestyle choice, one that's been paid for by me without my full knowledge. Megan, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. I didn't know, Abby, about the extra money. Mom said you were paying for my tuition. I would never have agreed to that. My mother shot her a warning look, but Megan kept going. I can get a part-time job to cover the actual amount. You shouldn't have to pay for my education. For the first time since the confrontation started, I felt a little bit of comfort. At least one family member seemed to understand how unfair the situation was. Thank you, Megan, I said. I appreciate that. So that's it? My mother demanded. You're just walking away from your family responsibilities? My responsibility is to myself right now, I said. Something I've ignored for too long. The next 2 weeks were some of the hardest of my life. The mood at home went back and forth, between cold silence and emotional manipulation. My mother would either make me feel guilty, after all I've done for you, ... make scary predictions. You'll regret leaving your family when you need us ... Try to bargain. What if you just covered the mortgage and Ryan's car? In the meantime, other family members started calling and texting. My mother had apparently told them her side of the story, that I had suddenly refused to help the family financially despite my huge income and was leaving them to possibly become homeless. Aunts, uncles, and cousins I rarely talked to suddenly had strong opinions about how selfish I was and how little loyalty I had to my family. I didn't bother defending myself to most of them. The few who seemed truly worried rather than judgmental got a short explanation that the financial arrangement had become unsustainable and unfair. Some understood, others didn't. I found that I cared less about their opinions than I would have thought. At work, I focused on my clients' finances with a new sense of purpose, maybe to make up for my failure to manage my own. I set up meetings with a financial advisor who wasn't connected to my firm to help me get my finances in order and make a budget that put my needs and goals first. For the first time, I started to see my income as truly mine, not a family resource to be used whenever needed. I also started seeing a therapist, Dr. Winters, who specialized in family dynamics. In our sessions, I began to see patterns that had been there long before the financial exploitation began. What you're describing sounds like a form of parentification, Dr. Winters explained during one session. You were given adult responsibilities from a young age, especially after your father's death. You became the family's emotional and financial caregiver, which is the opposite of the natural parent-child relationship. But I wanted to help, I said weakly. Wanting to help is natural and healthy, she agreed. Being manipulated into giving up your own well-being and future is not. There's a difference between helping a family and being taken advantage of by one. These talks were painful but also eye-opening. I started to see how my mother's grief after my father's death had turned into a feeling of being entitled to financial support, how my siblings had been encouraged to rely on me instead of becoming independent, and how I had been trained to think that giving up myself was the same as love and worth. As my moving date got closer, the pressure from my family got more intense. My mother made one last dramatic attempt to change my mind, inviting my aunt and uncle over for dinner without telling me. They're just worried about your mother and siblings, my aunt explained as we sat uncomfortably in the living room. Family has to stick together through hard times. I agree, I said calmly. But helping them be financially irresponsible isn't helping anyone in the long run. Your mother is getting older, my uncle argued. She can't work forever. Don't you think you owe her some security? I believe in helping my mother, I said, but not at the expense of my own financial security, and not through lies. There were reasonable ways we could have set up family support that didn't involve lying to me about where my money was going. The conversation went in circles until I finally excused myself to keep packing. Later, I overheard my mother crying dramatically in the kitchen, telling my aunt, I just don't know what we'll do without her help. We might lose the house. The manipulation was so obvious now that I could see it for what it was. The house payment was well within what my mother could afford on her manager's salary if she changed her spending habits. The financial crisis she was predicting was entirely her own fault, and was meant to pull me back into the role of family provider. The day before I moved, my brother came to my room while I was taping up the last of my boxes. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "So you're really doing this?"
he said, not quite looking at me. "Yes, Ryan, I really am." He sighed heavily.
"Look, I know things got messed up, but couldn't you just keep helping out with my truck until I find a better job? Just a few more months?" I stopped packing and looked at him directly. No, the simple refusal seemed to shock him. He had clearly expected me to argue or bargain, the same pattern we had been following for years. "But it's not my fault the job market stinks," he said. "It's not about fault," I explained. "It's about responsibility. Your truck payment is your responsibility, not mine. So that's it? You just don't care what happens to me." His voice had the hurt tone that had worked on me so many times before. "I care about you, Ryan, but caring doesn't mean I have to pay your bills." He left without another word, slamming the door behind him. I kept packing, feeling a strange mix of guilt and determination. The guilt was old and familiar, the voice that said I was selfish for putting myself first. The determination was new but getting stronger, the voice that said I deserved a life of my own. The next morning, I loaded the last of my things into my car. My mother and siblings stood on the porch, watching silently. No hugs, no good wishes, just silent disapproval in the way they stood. As I drove away from the house where I had spent most of my life, tears streamed down my face. Not because I was making the wrong choice, but because the right choice hurt so much. I was leaving behind not just my family, but the identity I had built around being their support system, their safety net, their financial savior. Who was I if I wasn't the responsible one, the provider, the perfect daughter who gave up everything for her family's well-being? It was time to find out. My new apartment in Boston at first felt more like a hotel room than a home, unfamiliar, impersonal, and a little bit scary in its emptiness. The first night, I sat on the floor, eating takeout, surrounded by boxes and bare walls, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. The silence was deep after years of living with the sounds of my family, my mother's TV shows, Ryan's music, Megan's phone calls. But there was also a peace to that silence, a lack of tension I hadn't realized I had been carrying until it was gone. That first night, I slept better than I had in years, even though the surroundings were strange and my temporary bed was an air mattress. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm, naturally woken by sunlight coming through blinds I had forgotten to close. The realization that I didn't have to make the 90-minute commute to work felt like a physical sensation, a weight being lifted from my chest. I could walk to the office in 15 minutes. The 2 extra hours in my day felt like an extravagant gift. That first week was a blur of practical tasks, unpacking boxes, putting together furniture from IKEA, getting utilities set up in my name, and changing my address on accounts and documents. These everyday activities still represented my independence and freedom. The next step was making financial changes. I opened new bank accounts at a different bank, changed my direct deposit, and systematically changed all my automatic payments to make sure my mother had no access to my finances. With the help of my financial advisor, I made a realistic budget that included not just necessities but also savings goals, retirement contributions, and, most surprisingly, money for personal enjoyment. "Your expenses have dropped by over $7,000 a month," my advisor said during our review meeting. "That's a life-changing difference." It was, in fact, life-changing to see my income as my own resource rather than a family fund. For the first time, I started to think about things that had seemed impossible before: owning a home, traveling internationally, getting advanced degrees, and retiring early. The financial freedom was both exciting and a little bit scary in its vastness. Meanwhile, the consequences of my leaving continued. At first, my mother called every day, her messages switching between anger, "How could you abandon us like this?" and manipulation, "Ryan might lose his truck, and it will be your fault," and occasional attempts at making up that always came back to asking for money. I set boundaries I had never tried to set before, letting most calls go to voicemail, and responding with short, factual texts when I did. When I talked to her, I kept the conversations away from money and on neutral topics. If she kept talking about finances, I ended the call politely but firmly. It was awkward and went against decades of training, but it was necessary for me to heal. My siblings' reactions were very different. Ryan's communication mostly consisted of texts asking for loans or complaining about money problems. I stood my ground, offering to help him make a budget or find a better job, but not giving him any direct financial help.
His messages slowly
Became less frequent as he realized the Bank of Abigail was permanently closed. Megan surprised me 3 weeks after I moved. She asked if we could get coffee. We met at a cafe halfway between Boston and Springfield, both a little nervous about this new dynamic. "I'm sorry," she said, after we had made some awkward small talk. "I should have noticed what was happening. I should have questioned it." Her apology, which was unexpected and seemed real, brought tears to my eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about our family's patterns," she continued. "How Mom always made you the responsible one and me the baby who needed to be taken care of. It wasn't fair to either of us." We talked for hours that day, really talking as adults rather than as roles in a broken family system. Megan said she had found a part-time job to cover the rest of her tuition and was thinking about staying in Boston after graduation instead of moving back home. "I need to learn how to be independent," she said, "like you." Her words meant a lot to me. Maybe some good would come out of this painful breakup after all. As weeks turned into months, I started to build a life that felt truly like my own. I joined a running group that met on Saturday mornings in Boston Common, and I found a surprising amount of happiness in physical activity and casual friendships that had nothing to do with work or family. I signed up for a photography class, something I had always been interested in but never had time for during my commuting years. I redecorated my apartment with colors and styles I liked without thinking about anyone else's preferences. Small pleasures became important signs of my new independence, buying fresh flowers just because they made me happy, sleeping in on Sundays without feeling guilty, and cooking complicated meals for myself instead of rushing through drive-thrus between commitments. I found parts of myself that had been hidden under family responsibilities: a love of jazz music, an interest in documentary films, and a preference for spicy foods that my family had never liked. Not everything went smoothly. The first family emergency came about 2 months after I moved. My mother called on a Tuesday evening, her voice tense with what seemed like real distress. "The furnace died," she explained. "The repair company wants $4,000 for a replacement. And we don't have it, Abby. It's going to be below freezing this weekend." My first thought was to offer the money to solve the problem, as I always had. But Dr. Winter's voice echoed in my mind from our most recent therapy session. "Consider whether you're responding out of healthy love or unhealthy guilt and obligation." "That sounds like a difficult situation," I said carefully. "Have you called the bank about a home equity loan? Or checked if the repair company offers financing?" My mother's tone changed right away. "I can't believe you're suggesting I get into debt when you have plenty of money sitting in your account. This is your family home too, Abigail." "I'm sorry you're dealing with this stress," I said, staying calm. "But there are financial options available that don't involve me paying for it directly." She hung up without another word. I sat with the uncomfortable feeling of her disappointment and anger, fighting the urge to call back and give in. The next day, Megan texted me to let me know that our mother had been able to get financing through the repair company. The furnace was being replaced. The world hadn't ended because I said no. Each small boundary I kept, each time I put my needs first, built my confidence in this new way of living. I started to see that true generosity comes from a choice, not from being forced or manipulated, and that I could still be a loving daughter and sister without being a financial crutch. Dating came back into my life, which had been almost impossible in my previous situation. Through a coworker's introduction, I met Michael, a landscape architect with kind eyes and a quiet confidence I found appealing. Our first date went from dinner to a long walk along the harbor to coffee at a late-night cafe, with conversation flowing easily. On our third date, when the topic of family came up, I told him a shorter version of my recent experience. I watched his face carefully, half expecting him to judge me or not understand. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. My older sister went through something similar with our dad after our parents divorced, he said. It took her years to stop feeling responsible for his financial problems. Family dynamics can be really complicated. His understanding without any judgment felt like a gift. As our relationship grew over the next few months, I found myself experiencing what a healthy partnership could be: mutual support, respect for boundaries, shared joy, and growth. The difference between my family relationships, and this was huge and educational. About 4 months after I moved, my mother stepped up her efforts to get back in control. She started telling extended family and family friends that I had cut her off completely, that I refused to talk to her, and that I had abandoned my family when they needed me. The worried calls and messages that followed were hard to deal with. I found myself having to defend choices I knew were healthy and necessary, explaining complicated things to people who had only heard one distorted side of the story. Dr. Winters helped me come up with things to say in these situations and reminded me that I didn't owe an explanation to everyone who asked. Your journey is yours, she said. Not everyone will understand or agree, and that's okay. I started to be more careful about which calls I returned and which relationships I put energy into keeping. Some family members, once they heard my side, saw the manipulation and offered to help. Others stayed firmly on my mother's side, convinced of my selfishness. I learned to accept this split as unavoidable instead of trying to get everyone to like me. As my 1-year anniversary of moving approached, I realized how much my perspective had changed. The guilt that had at first been overwhelming had lessened to occasional small feelings. The worry about my family's well-being had been replaced by a belief in their ability to solve their own problems. The fear of being selfish had turned into an understanding of healthy self-care. I was building a life that honored both my responsibilities to myself and my connections to others' connections based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. It wasn't always easy, and there were days when I had doubts, when my mother's voice in my head questioned my choices. But those voices got quieter as my confidence in my new path grew stronger. The woman who had driven away from her family home 6 months earlier, tears streaming down her face and unsure of who she was outside of being the family provider, was becoming someone new, someone stronger, clearer about her boundaries, more authentic in her relationships, and more at peace with herself. The price of this change had been high-strained family relationships, painful confrontations, and judgment from others, but as I sat on my apartment's rooftop terrace one evening, watching the sunset over the Boston skyline, I knew for sure that it had been worth it. The life I was building might have come from pain and betrayal, but it was growing into something beautiful and truly mine. 6 months into my independent life, I had a small dinner party in my apartment to celebrate. Around my table were the people who had helped me get through this change. Taylor, my friend who had offered her guest room without a second thought. Dr. Winters, who had become more of a mentor than a therapist. Michael, whose steady presence had become an anchor in my life. And surprisingly, Megan, the only family member with whom I had stayed in regular contact. As we drank wine and talked, I looked around at these faces and felt a deep sense of gratitude. This was a different kind of family, one built on mutual respect, honesty, and genuine care instead of obligation and financial dependence. The realization brought unexpected tears to my eyes. To new beginnings, I said, raising my glass. And to all of you who helped make them possible. Financial freedom had given me space for personal growth I hadn't expected. Without the heavy burden of supporting my family, I had resources, both financial and emotional, to invest in myself. I had started taking classes toward an MBA, something I had always wanted but had decided was not practical given my previous financial obligations. I had also joined a financial literacy volunteer program, helping low-income people learn about budgeting, managing debt, and saving. This volunteer work turned out to be unexpectedly healing. Using my professional skills to help others become independent instead of helping them stay dependent gave me a sense of purpose and contribution that was healthier than my previous family role. Seeing clients feel more confident in their financial decisions reminded me of my own journey toward financial independence. Therapy continued to be a key part of my healing process. With Dr. Winter's help, I looked at the reasons for my tendency to take on too much responsibility, tracing it back beyond my father's death to early childhood patterns, where my achievements and reliability had been praised and rewarded a lot. You learn early that your value was tied to what you could give to others, Dr. Winters said. That's a heavy burden for a child to carry, and it followed you into adulthood. It wasn't easy to work through these ideas. There were sessions where I left feeling emotionally drained, raw from facing deeply held beliefs about my worth and my role in relationships. But slowly, I started to separate my identity from my usefulness to others, to see my own value outside of what I could provide financially or practically. My relationships with my extended family changed in unexpected ways. My mother, realizing that her direct manipulation was no longer working, had started a campaign of false information, telling relatives and family friends that I had completely cut her off and refused to have any contact. This led to uncomfortable conversations with aunts, uncles, and cousins who had only heard her side of the story. At first, I tried to explain the whole situation to everyone who asked, determined to set the record straight, but this turned out to be exhausting and often pointless, as many had already made up their minds based on my mother's story. Eventually, I took a simpler approach. I love my family, but we needed to set healthier boundaries. I'm still figuring out what that looks like. Those who were truly concerned about family harmony rather than taking sides seemed happy with this answer. Those who insisted I was wrong to put my own financial well-being first slowly left my life. A natural process that, while painful, left me with relationships that were more real and supportive. About 7 months after I moved, Megan graduated with her master's degree. I went to the ceremony, sitting separately from my mother and Ryan, a setup that felt symbolic of our new family dynamic. Afterward, during the reception, Megan surprised me by introducing me to her professors and friends as my sister, the financial analyst who inspired me to be independent. That evening, over dinner to celebrate her achievement, Megan told me something that shocked me. Mom's been telling people. You refused to help with my education, she said, stirring her pasta absent-mindedly. I corrected her in front of Aunt Susan last week and told her you had actually paid far more than you should have for years and that I was doing fine on my own now. She didn't speak to me for 3 days. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle, I said, feeling guilty that my actions had created tension between Megan and our mother. Don't be, Megan said firmly. It's actually been good for me to see the dynamics more clearly. I'm learning to stand up for myself, too. And she hesitated. I've started therapy. Her admission filled me with hope, not just for Megan, but for the possibility that the cycles of financial dependence and emotional manipulation could be broken in our family, even if only a little bit and slowly. Ryan's journey took a different path. After losing his truck to repossession when he couldn't make the payments, he seemed to have a wake-up call. Through Megan, I heard that he had taken a full-time job at a construction company and moved into a small apartment with roommates. His first time living on his own at 32. We weren't in direct contact, but I felt cautiously hopeful about these changes. My mother was the most resistant to the new family dynamic. Her communications, when they happened, continued to be about financial needs and subtle guilt trips. I maintained firm boundaries while keeping the door open for a relationship that wasn't based on my financial support. I'm happy to have Sunday dinner once a month, I told her during a rare phone call. I'd love to hear about your book club and your friends, but I won't be talking about financial matters or accepting guilt for my decision to live independently. She was silent for a long moment before replying. I don't know how to have that kind of relationship with you, Abigail. Her honesty, maybe unintentional, was revealing. Our relationship had been so defined by financial dependence that she couldn't imagine one without it. The realization was sad, but also cleared things up. Maybe we can learn together, I suggested, though I wasn't sure she was willing to try. 10 months into my independent life, I got a promotion at work to senior portfolio manager, a position that came with a big pay raise and more responsibility. The irony was not lost on me that, Without the financial drains of my family, I didn't actually need the extra income. Instead of going toward mortgage payments for a house I didn't live in or car loans for vehicles I didn't drive, my new salary increase went straight into investments for my future. For the first time, I was building wealth instead of just making money that flowed out to others. The sense of security this created was deep, healing some of the financial worry that had been caused by the hard years after my father's death. Around this time, Taylor convinced me to go on a vacation to Costa Rica with her, my first real vacation in years. In the past, family obligations and money problems had limited my travels to short weekend trips or family events that rarely felt relaxing. This 2-week adventure with its beaches, rainforests, and complete lack of family drama was life-changing. "You're different here," Taylor said as we watched the sunset from a beachfront restaurant. "More relaxed, more present," she was right. Away from the constant stress of family expectations, I felt lighter, more real. I came back from that trip with a renewed commitment to making time in my life for joy and adventure, rather than just duty and responsibility. As the 1-year anniversary of my move got closer, I found myself thinking about the journey. The financial numbers were striking. I had gone from spending over $9,000 a month on family expenses to having a balanced budget that allowed for both current enjoyment and future security. I had gone from helping them stay dependent to helping them become independent, both for myself and indirectly for my siblings. But the emotional change was even more important. The constant knot of worry in my chest had gone away. The automatic guilt I felt when I spent money on myself had faded. The habit of putting everyone else's needs before my own had been replaced by a healthier balance of self-care and genuine, freely chosen generosity. I wasn't perfect at these new habits. There were still times when old habits came back, when my mother's voice in my head questioned my right to put myself first, when guilt about my family's money problems crept in. But these moments became less frequent and less powerful as my new ways of thinking became more solid. On the exact anniversary of my departure from the family home, I got an unexpected email from my mother. I opened it nervously, expecting to be blamed or asked for money. Instead, I found something that was completely surprising. "Abigail, I've been doing a lot of thinking over the past year. While I still don't completely understand or agree with your decisions, I can see that you're doing well on your own. The house feels empty without you, but maybe it was time for all of us to learn to stand on our own 2 feet. If you're willing, I'd like to try having a relationship that isn't about money. Maybe we could meet for lunch sometime, Mom." I read the message several times, trying to find any hidden manipulation or secret motives. It seemed genuinely, though a little bit nervously, nice. After talking it over with Dr. Winters, I decided to reply positively but cautiously, suggesting lunch at a neutral restaurant halfway between our homes. That lunch was awkward, with long silences and careful avoidance of sensitive topics. But it was also the first time in years that I had talked to my mother without any financial expectations or obligations. It was a small step maybe, but a meaningful one. As I drove home afterward, I thought about the deep life lessons of the past year. True family supports your growth rather than taking advantage of your success. Financial boundaries aren't selfish. They're necessary for healthy relationships. Saying no doesn't make you a bad person. It often makes you a healthier one. Sometimes the people who should love you the most are the ones who take advantage of you the most. And realizing this isn't being disloyal, it's being clear. The path to real generosity starts with putting your own oxygen mask on first. The price of freedom, financial, emotional, and psychological, can be high, but it's worth every penny. My journey from financial exploitation to empowerment wasn't over. Relationships continued to change, boundaries needed to be constantly maintained, and old patterns sometimes came back. But I had found a basic truth that would guide me going forward. Love without respect isn't really love at all. And family ties should lift you up, not drain you dry. If you've ever found yourself financially supporting family members beyond what you can afford or are comfortable with, know that you're not alone. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for your well-being and, in the end, for theirs. Have you ever had to make a hard decision for your own financial health? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, true family supports your dreams rather than taking advantage of your success. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to create the life you deserve.